Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first training session for the Irish market of JustisOne. My name's Rose. I'm Head of Training at Justis Publishing, and I'm going to be taking you through the website for the next hour with this particular focus on the Irish content and how you can use the different features to have a particular focus on Ireland. Now, if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, then you will have a questions section of the GoToWebinar panel, which should be in the top right-hand side of your screen. Please do feel free to ask questions at any time. If I get a chance to check them and it's something that I can answer during the webinar, then I will do so. If it's related to a specific account or if I don't have enough time, then I will contact you individually after the webinar has finished. Now, I'm going to start with the content because obviously when you're using a legal database, what content that database has is crucial. So I'm on the Justis homepage here. If I hover over content, you can see that we have content from the UK, of course from Ireland, from Europe, which is the EU, Caribbean content, Canada, Australia, and international. Now, international are some of the smaller jurisdictions that we cover, such as Jersey or Singapore, and it can also mean things like the international law reports, which have content from various different jurisdictions within them. Now, if I click on Ireland, I'm not going to go through every single court and all the dates with you, but you can see them up on the screen now. You can go back and have a look at them later on if you're interested. But essentially, in the Irish core, we have the largest collection of Irish case law available anywhere online. So whether the cases are reported or not, we have an absolute huge collection on JustisOne. And you can see, as I said, all the courts and the dates there. We also have Irish legislation back to 1925. Now, these are the acts as they were when they were first created, without any amendments. So if you did want up-to-date, current, consolidated legislation, then you'd need to use another service. But we do have Irish legislation on the service itself. Now, as well as the content in the Irish core, we also have the Irish reports and digests. They go all the way back to 1838. And you may have seen there was a press release towards the end of last week where we announced Justis is working in partnership with the ICLR in Ireland. As some of you may know, the Irish reports are usually run about 2 or 3 years after the cases have come out due to the time taken for the editorial input, and then binding the documents, creating the hard copy, and then they're put online. So this process can take sort of 2 to 3 years. But what we're going to do going forward is as soon as the cases are ready, as soon as they've been selected and edited by the ICLR, then we're going to put them straight onto the Justis website, even if they haven't been released yet in the hard copy. It just means that cases will be on the service much more quickly. We already have 2017 cases on the JustisOne platform, which is extremely exciting. Now, I'm going to actually go into the service now. I'm going to sign in here on the top right-hand side of the screen. I get the option for Justis, the legacy platform, or JustisOne. If I click in there, I've automatically been authenticated. If you wanted to get your users to come straight to the JustisOne platform and not have the option of going into the old Justis platform, then the URL you can see in the bar at the top of the screen is app.justis.com. So if you go to app.justis.com rather than www.justis.com, it will bring you straight here. So what is JustisOne? We've already talked a bit about the content. As well as the full text content that we've run through, JustisOne still has an extremely powerful citator. For those of you who are familiar with JustCite, JustisOne still has all of that information. So essentially an index of over 100 different legal publishers. Some of them are subscription services like Westlaw and Lexis. Some of them are free services like Bailey, the Irish Statute Book. But regardless of whether this content is available on JustisOne in the full text or not, we still have this index of all of these different cases, which means that when you're searching on JustisOne, you're much more likely to find what you're looking for. Even if it's not available with us in the full text, we'll point you in the right direction and let you know where you can find that content. So as well as the content itself that we have, as well as this huge index of other cases, other sources, we've put together this website essentially to harness all of that information. So we have so many documents, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of documents on JustisOne. And the reason we built this new platform was we needed something strong enough to be able to utilize that content in a productive way. You know, we have so much content, we didn't want our customers to be spending hours sifting through pages and pages of results. So the technology that has been built on JustisOne is completely new. So if you haven't seen JustisOne before, it's all brand new, so I'm excited to show it to you this morning. Now I'm going to take a quick poll. So I'm going to select the poll now. I'm quite new with this technology. I'm going to launch that. So I'm just going to take a quick poll just for my understanding of how many people who are attending the webinar have used the service before. Perfect, thank you very much. And I'm going to shut that down for a second. So I can see there's quite a few people, but roughly half of our attendees haven't used the service before. Now, I've talked about why we created the service. I'm now going to go into actually using the service and how you can make the most of the time that you spend researching. So obviously, if you know the case that you're looking for, searching is extremely straightforward. You can start typing the name of the case, and as you type, JustisOne will give you suggestions that will get more and more specific as you type. So I typed in Hawhian, half of Moriarty, and I've got the results coming up there for the High Court and the Supreme Court version of that case, so I can select whichever one I am interested in. Of course, if you also know the citation of the case, you can type that in. And because we're searching across all the different platforms, it really doesn't matter which citation you put in, whether it's a neutral citation, whether it's an Irish report, whether it's an ILRM. It doesn't matter. You don't have to remember which different publishers have which different content. Type it in as it comes, no brackets or capital letters. And again, we're seeing suggestions of all the cases that match our search in our results. Now, obviously, if you know the case that you're looking for, searching can be relatively straightforward. The difficulty can come if you don't know the case that you're looking for. Now, if you were just searching for an area of law, you can type that in. You can see that my results are coming. I have a few results here. The first one is employment law, which is turned purple, and I then have cases which have employment law in their titles. Now, if I click enter, and I'm just searching for employment law cases, the reason that it's turned purple is that employment law is recognized as a term from our taxonomy. Now, some people are really interested in taxonomy, some people are not at all. So I'm going to keep it brief. But essentially, when we created JustisOne, because we had all this content, the legal taxonomies that were available and had been created at the time just weren't going to cut the mustard when it came to harnessing all of the content that we had. So we had to create our own taxonomy from scratch, which has taken quite a lot of time. So it is absolutely huge. There's just under 50 main areas of law in the taxonomy, but they all branch out into their own specific areas. And overall, we have about 1.7 million terms in our taxonomy that all of the judgments have been categorized against. So when you're searching for employment law cases, we're not just searching for employment law in the full text of a document or in the headnote. We're searching for any case that's been categorized as an employment law case, which just means that your results are going to be that much stronger. Now, when we're looking at our results, we can see first off, we have a figure of how many cases have appeared in our results, and you can see that they're split between cases and legislation. So if we want to focus on cases, we can do just that. Now, This little button here is to change the results order. So at the moment we're looking at the relevancy ranking. So what that does is it brings leading employment law cases to the top of our search. If I wanted to click on that, I could, and I could see and change to the most recent cases or to the oldest cases, depending on my preference. Now you can also filter by the categories that are represented in our results. So these are the main categories from the taxonomy that I've just mentioned. If there's any of these that are particularly of interest or particularly not of interest, you can make sure that they're selected or deselected. Again, just narrowing your results down. We also have the jurisdiction filter here, so you can see that we've got results from the UK, from the EU, from Canada. If I click on show jurisdiction settings, I can see which jurisdictions I'm searching across at this point in time, which is all of them essentially on JustisOne. So if I'm particularly interested in Ireland, all I need to do is deselect all of the other jurisdictions, and then I can click from the jurisdiction pane back onto my search results, and you can see that they've automatically been updated, so they're only Irish results that I'm seeing at the moment. The next button that we can see is full text. So essentially, every single document that we have the full text for, if you click that button, that is all you'll see. You'll be removing any results that we don't have the full text for on JustisOne. Of course, it's up to you whether you want to do that so that you're only clicking on cases that you can actually read on the JustisOne platform. However, you could be missing out crucial cases if you do that. And as I said, if you find a case that we don't have on JustisOne, we'll tell you where else you can find it, just in case it's something that's going to be crucial to you. Now, when we're looking at the results themselves, you get a little bit of information on these profile cards. You get the name of the case, a few of the main categories. You can see that employment law has been highlighted there, as that's the category that we searched for. You get some information on the treatments, so whether that case has been subsequently cited and whether those the times that it was subsequently cited were positive, negative, or neutral. You are informed of the court that the case has come from, and if you click on that, you can see the different citations and the different places that it's been reported. The flag obviously represents the country, and then the blue document icon will tell you that we have the full text. So before you click through, you'll know whether the full text will be there for you or not. So that's generally the results. Now, obviously, we did quite a broad search for employment law. If I was someone who wasn't that familiar with this area of law, I could type it in. I've got my most relevant cases at the top of my search, so I know where to start my research. However, if I had a more specific search query, I might want to add more information into our text box. I mean, even after filtering, we have over 6,000 cases in our list of results, which is far too many. So I would always suggest the more information you have about the case, the better. So as well as employment law, I could also add in, I know the case was to do with maternity leave, and it was to do with the business Intel. Now, if I search for that, you can see employment law and maternity leave, they've both turned purple, they're both categories. Intel has stayed black, it's not a category. So whereas all of the cases that we're looking at have been categorized as employment law and maternity leave, they haven't been categorized as Intel cases. Of course, that wouldn't make sense, but they have Intel either in the name of the case as per our first result, or for the following results, they'll mention Intel within the full text of the document. If I click onto the advanced search, so some people prefer using an advanced search option, you can see that the categories and the full text search have automatically gone into the correct box. That's just because the search engine is extremely clever. If I wanted to specifically tell JustisOne, I don't want to search maternity leave in as a category, for example. I want every case that mentions maternity leave in the full text. I can move that manually into the full text field myself, and that will have an impact on my results. I can also add more information. So if I'm particularly interested in cases from the High Court and I want cases from 2000 to 2015, I can add that additional information here, and you can see it's updated in the search bar, again with the color coding. So that is generally searching on JustisOne. The only thing that I want to mention quickly is boolean operators or search operators. Now, some of you may be familiar with these, some of you may not. They are extremely useful when you're doing your research to ensure that you either include or you deliberately exclude anything that you want to make your search results much stronger from the get-go. So I'm going to give you a sort of rudimentary example here. So for example, if I was looking for something within the full text of the document and I knew that the judge in his judgment had used the Cockney rhyming slang apples and pears, I can type that in to JustisOne and I will get many results for any case that has ever mentioned apples and pears. So I've got 8 here from Ireland. So these are 8 documents that have mentioned apples and pears. However, these cases could have the word apple in one paragraph and the word pears in another, and it's not together at all, therefore not the Cockney rhyming slang, not what I'm looking for. So to ensure that this phrase comes together, those 3 words in that particular order, what I need to do is to put this in quotation marks. So whether it was a name of a witness and you didn't want, you know, it could be that you have a name of a witness, you want that to appear in the text, and if it was, say, Steve Smith, you could get results where one of the defendants is called Steve and the judge is Justice Smith, and that's not at all what you searched for. Well, it was, but it wasn't what you meant to search for. If you then put Steve Smith into quotation marks, like I've done here with apples and pears, you tell the service, I want these particular words in this particular order. So if I search now, I've got no results. Probably not the best idea searching for Cockney rhyming slang across Irish case law and legislation. But what I've got here is a bar telling me there's no results found for my search, and I get the option to expand the search to all jurisdictions. So if I don't find what I'm looking for in my jurisdiction, I can expand the search to all jurisdictions, and I now have multiple results for apples and pears together. So that is one example of a boolean operator and how you can use it to make your search stronger. Now, if I take this search out of quotation marks and I remove the and, I've now just got apples, pears. JustisOne will assume an and. It assumes you're searching for apples and pears in the same way that if you searched for murder and knife, it would assume that you wanted cases that mentioned the words murder and knife, because you wouldn't just want a case that's to do with someone stealing a knife, for example. So JustisOne assumes an and. Now there may be instances where you don't want JustisOne to assume an and. For example, if you are searching for cases and you don't care if they're about apples or pears, as long as it talks about one. And in that instance, it really is that simple. Just add an or, apples or pears, any cases to do with either apples or pears. And this can be really useful if you are searching for a term and you know that it has synonyms. So for example, one judgment talking about children could mention children, and then you could have another judgment that mentions infants. Now, I'm not necessarily going to want to rule out one or the other because they're synonyms, but if I only search for children, I'm not going to get those infant results because I haven't searched for infant, and that's the same with every single database you'll ever use. So we need to tell the service, child or infant, apples or pears. Make sure that you're not missing anything important just because of the terminology that you have used. Similarly, if you wanted apples but not pears, I specifically don't want anything that refers to pears, then type in not. So for example, if I'm interested in any cases to do with newspapers, but specifically not the Times newspaper, I would put newspaper, not Times. And it just tells the search exactly what you want or what you don't want, and means that your results are going to be that much stronger. Now I've got one more for you before we move on, and that is the proximity operator. So I want to tell the service that I'm interested in cases to do with apples and pears, but they have to be near each other. They have to be in the similar context. I'm not interested in a judgment that mentions apples in paragraph 1 and pears in paragraph 20, and they're not whatsoever related. So to do that, if I put W/, I can then choose want to find cases where the word apples appears within 5 words of the word pears, or for example within 10 words of the word pears. So for example, if I was investigating and doing my research on a case which is about children's homes and neglect in children's homes, I'm not just interested in a case that mentions neglect somewhere in the document and then completely unrelated talks about children's homes. Potentially someone grew up in a children's home and went on to suffer neglect elsewhere. I want to find cases where the neglect has happened within the children's home. What I would do in that instance is children's home within 10 words or within 20 words, however specific you want to be, of neglect, and it just means that your results are going to be that much stronger for it. So I'm going to move on. I'm not going to talk, as I said, for hours and hours about Boolean operators, and I must point out these aren't specific to JustisOne. You can use these on all databases, including Google, to make your results as strong as they can possibly be. So I'm going to move on and actually show you a case, probably about time, as it's to show you a legal database, but I just want to make sure that all the bases are covered, especially for those who haven't used the service before. So I've started typing. The case that I'm looking for is Meadows and the Minister for Justice and Equality and Law Reform, and perfect, here is my results. So on the left hand side, again, we've got a list of results that match my search, so these could be cases that have referred to the Meadows and Minister for Justice case, so it's within the full text of the judgment. That's why they're coming up in our search results. The right hand side of the screen is the exact match. So this is the case that JustisOne is telling us is the best match for the search that we have done. So I can click on that there and it will take me through to the document. Now you can clearly see that the screen has been divided into 2 sections. The left hand side of the screen is the case analysis, the surrounding information about the case. The right hand side, we have the full text. So we're currently looking at the judgment, and if I wanted to read it, I have it there for me, nice and easy to see. If I actually wanted to read the document, I recommend you use the read mode, because if you click on that, it brings the text into the center of the screen and removes any distractions. If you're anything like me, I often get distracted, so it's just a nicer view to have a look at the case there. Now, we also have, this case has been reported in the Irish reports, which we obviously have on JustisOne, because we've already discussed that. So if I click on that tab, I can then see the Irish report. Now, if your organisation subscribes to the Irish core but not the Irish reports, then you would get a panel here saying you don't subscribe to this content. But if you have JustisOne and you have the Irish core, then you'll always be able to see the judgment for the case. Now next to this, we also have a list of citations and sources, and this is essentially where this case has been reported online anywhere. So you have all the parallel citations, so you have the neutral citation, the Justice Irish cases citation and the Irish report citation, and each one tells you where this case has been reported online, and you can click on any of these links to take you through to the full text on that service. So if I click on the link for Bailey, it takes me straight through, because of course Bailey is a free service and we do index Bailey on JustisOne, so that you can go straight through and read the full text on that site if that is your preference. But it just means if you come across cases in other jurisdictions and you don't subscribe to that part of the service, or it's not a case that we have in our collection on JustisOne, if it is available somewhere freely, or if it's available on another service that you subscribe to, you can link through without having to leave our database, sign into another, run your search again. To save you time, you can navigate that content from within JustisOne itself. Now, you also, of course, have the option to download the case. So if you click on that button, it gives you the option of downloading the judgment or the Irish report, and then once you've downloaded it, you can print it, email it, do whatever you want with the document itself. But that is how you would do those tasks, by clicking on download. So that is the full text and how you would find the full text using JustisOne. But we don't want you to use our service and go straight through to the full text. We want you to spend a bit more time on JustisOne, and what we want you to do before you read the full text and invest the time in reading some of these judgments, which can be extremely long, is to find out whether the case is good law, whether the case is current law, which particular parts of the judgment you should be paying attention to, which other cases you should be looking at. There's so much surrounding information that you can garner from JustisOne, and that is all done on the left-hand side of the screen, which we will draw our attention to next. So the page that we're currently looking at is an overview. You have the name of the case and the citation and some of the main categories below that. Now I'm going to come back to these pink sections a bit later on. We can see a few of the categories. As I mentioned, there's 3 there. If you wanted to see all of the categories, simply click on the categories tab, and these are the main categories that the Meadows case has been assigned to within the Justice taxonomy. Now, by looking at these categories, I get a really good idea of what this case is about. You know, traditionally, especially for cases that weren't reported, it's very difficult to know what they're about without reading the full text. And even if a case has been reported, you would have the head note to tell you that information, but the head notes can often be biased, they can often be written at a point in time and the use of the case has changed since the head note was written, which has happened in multiple examples. So the categories are a really good way of getting an overview, because these are all of the categories that the Meadows case has been assigned to within our taxonomy. Now, if there's a particular category that you are interested in, so say for example crime and sentencing, you can click on crime and sentencing and it'll show you the leading cases for that area of law, the recent cases. So if I click on that, you can see 2017 cases on the screen, and any important legislation for that area of law. Now you can see that the leading cases, the recent cases, are all Irish, and that's because our settings, our jurisdiction settings, are specifying that we're only interested in Ireland. So that's important to bear in mind when you are using this feature. But again, if you're searching an area of law that you're not too familiar with, this is a great way of getting a good overview of the main cases that are related to this particular area of law. Now I'm going to close that for a second and go back to the case that we were looking at, Meadows. And those are the categories. The next thing I'm going to show you are the cited cases. So these are the cases that Meadows discussed within its own judgment. Now you can see the top case was adopted. We then have 3 that were applied. They're all in green because they're positive treatments. Then any negative cases are in red and neutral cases are orange. If you hover over, like I'm doing here, it gives you a little bit of an explanation of what we mean with these different terms. And that's not because we doubt your legal knowledge in any way, it's just because different publishers and different jurisdictions can have different meanings to the same term. So we didn't want there to be any sort of confusion with regards to what we mean. And this information is all compiled by our legally trained editors, most of whom are actually based over in Ireland themselves. They read all these cases. They're the ones that put this information together. It's not done in an automated process at all. And that just means that if a case, for example, has been mentioned within another citation, a citation within a citation, and it's not relevant, we take it out of the list. So the cases you're looking at are cases that are actually going to be legally relevant to you. Now at the top of the screen I've got a little banner saying that I'm only seeing 38 of a possible 55 cited cases based on jurisdiction. Because my jurisdiction is set to Ireland alone, I'm not seeing every single case that Meadows looked at. So if I wanted to make sure that I'm seeing everything, click on Show All Jurisdictions, and that has now updated my list. So you can see we now also have a case from the UK Court of Appeal in our list of applied cases. So it's always important, if those banners come up, it's up to you. Do you want to see things? Do you not want to see things? But if you do, then it's very easy to include those cases within your results. So looking at this list, we've got 55 cases. We can see there's one that's been adopted, a few that have been applied. If I want to know more, if I want to know how this case has been adopted by Meadows or how these cases have been applied and why, all I need to do is come over to this button on the side of the screen. So this will tell me that 2 sections of the Meadows case refer to Heaney. And if I click on that button, it'll show me the exact 2 sections of Meadows that refer to Heaney. So I can look at the references within context and get a better understanding of why this case was adopted. This is particularly useful if I was searching a particular area of law, and it could be that the Meadows case is relating to multiple areas of law. I'm only interested in one of those. So even though they've adopted Heaney, it might be that they've adopted Heaney based on one of the other areas of law that are up for discussion and is not relevant to me whatsoever. Therefore, if I'd clicked on Heaney and spent time researching that judgment, I would have wasted my time. Whereas by clicking on this, I can see it in context. I can see whether the discussion surrounding the Heaney case is relevant to my research or not, and it just saves me time before I go in headfirst and start doing more research. Now you can click on multiple cases and they'll all come up in different color codes, and you can also use this arrow to navigate through the references to the different cases if you wanted to do so. I'm going to close that for now and get rid of those. The next thing I'm going to show you is the cited legislation. So this is any legislation that has been referenced within the Meadows case. So there are 2. I was going to read them and then I noticed that one is in Gaelic, so I'm definitely not going to embarrass myself by doing that. But again, this is done by our editorial team, so we won't just show you every single piece of legislation that's been mentioned in passing in Meadows. Legislation is only included if it's been substantively discussed in some way. Again, just saving you time. So you don't have a massive long list, you actually know what the meat of the legislation that's being discussed is. The next thing that we have over here is the citing cases. So of course these are the cases that since Meadows went to court in 2010, these are the cases that have referred to it. So you can see there are quite a few that have been distinguished. This time any negative cases come to the top of your search, because if your case has been overruled, you want to know about it. And actually a new feature on JustisOne, if a case has been overruled, you'll get a warning here in red to tell you that it's been overruled and when it was overruled as well. So it's very difficult to miss now, but obviously this is where you would come to get a bit more information about any treatments of Meadows since it went to court. And the beauty of JustisOne, because we're searching across so much content, including unreported cases, which have often overruled or given negative treatments to reported cases that people still use because they aren't aware of these unreported cases. And it also searches across different jurisdictions, which may not be binding but may be persuasive, and it searches across other publishers. So your due diligence is really being covered here, and you're much more unlikely to miss something using JustisOne than if you were to use one publisher and only search across one collection of content alone. Now, if you're interested in finding out if a particular case has referred to Meadows, as you can see by the length of the scroll bar here, it's a case that has been referred to multiple times. If you're interested in finding a particular case, or if you're interested in a particular court or particular jurisdiction, type the information that you have into that filter, and you can filter these results to find the ones that are going to be most of interest to you. Now, similarly to the cited cases, if we have the judgment for any of these cases that have referred to Meadows, you also get a link to tell you how many times this case has referred to Meadows. And if you click on that link, it'll open that case for you and take you directly to the reference to Meadows within that text. So I've gone from looking at the Meadows case, and I know that it was considered in the Jason Whelan case. I'm now immediately, with a click of one button, looking at the reference to Meadows in Jason Whelan, so I can decide whether that's relevant to my research or not. It's much more safeguarded way of making sure that if I'm doing a couple of hours research, I'm doing the best possible research and not spending a couple of hours looking at cases that aren't going to be relevant to my endeavors. So again, you can open multiple cases. Now, depending on the resolution of your screen will depend on how many cases you can see at one time. Now, because I'm using a laptop that's quite small, I can only see 2 cases at one time. So the first case that I was looking at, Meadows, has actually left my screen. I can use this arrow button to go back to have a look at Meadows, and I can also see Jason Whelan, but that's now pushed the third case off my screen because I can only see 2 at once. Obviously, I can use these arrows to navigate, but I can also click on all open documents, and that will serve as a reminder to me of which cases that I have open, and you can click on any of these to go to that case to see it as well. Now, I'm going to shut that case down for a second and just look at 2. Now, Meadows, you can see that the information we're looking at is the information that was on the left-hand side of the screen before we started looking at the multiple view. Whereas the Jason Whelan case, we're looking at the judgment, we're looking at the full text. I can change that view if I wanted to. So I'm looking at the full text of Jason Whelan. If I wanted to also look at the full text of the Meadows case, click on full text and it flips the pane around so that I'm now looking at the full text of the Meadows case. You can see that the button that did say full text now says analysis because I'm looking at the analysis. I'm looking at the full text. If I wanted to look at the analysis, click that and it'll flip back round. I can also keep 2 cases open but go into single view. So I can click the case that I want my focus to be, click on single view, and you can see I'm now only looking at the Meadows case. However, the Jason Whelan case is still open in the background, and I can click on that. If I decided to close the Jason Whelan case, I'm now only looking at Meadows. It's the only case that I have open. The reason that we decided to design JustisOne in this way so that you could look at multiple cases was just because we found it was much more sympathetic to the way that people did their research. People naturally would look at more than one case or cases and legislation at once, and it's very frustrating having multiple tabs open, multiple browsers open. You don't know where you're coming or going, you accidentally close things that you need. It's just extremely frustrating. So using JustisOne, you can have as much open as you want and not lose anything while you're doing your research. So those are the citing cases, and that's generally the information surrounding the case, but we do have a couple of extra tools that I wanted to show you before we end this webinar, and the first one of those is the precedent map. Now, for those of you who are familiar with JustCite, you'll be familiar with a version of the precedent map. However, it has had a makeover, so this is the new and improved precedent map. The case that we're looking at, Meadows, if you imagine that is the large circle, the white circle in the center of our screen. And the other cases are the cases that we did have in list format, the citing cases and the cited cases, the cases that Meadows has referred to and the cases that have referred to Meadows in turn. So the cases within the large white circle are the cases that Meadows has looked at. The cases on the outside of the large circle are the ones that have referred to Meadows. Now the color coding is all exactly the same, so green is a positive treatment, red is a negative treatment. You can hover over any of the arrows and it'll tell you exactly what type of treatment we're looking at. You can see at the top of the screen we're not seeing the neutral cases. Because Meadows is a case that has been referred to so many times, if I click on neutral, it really does fill up the screen. And again, my resolution is not great, so hopefully it would look better on yours if you have a better laptop than me. But you can still get a bit of information from the Precedent map. So what I wanted to explain to you is firstly that the cases around the outside, so the ones that have referred to Meadows, are all in chronological order. So the first case to refer to Meadows is A and Minister, and then the most recent case to refer to Meadows would be down here in the right hand corner. Now firstly, you can see that these cases, the most recent cases to have referred to Meadows, are all from 2017. So that gives us a really good indication that this case is still current law. People are still using this case as an authority in court this year. If you opened up a precedent map and no one had referred to it in 20 years, there's probably a reason for that, and it would send alarm bells ringing. Also, because the cases are in chronological order, it gives you more context with regards to the different treatment types. So when we opened our list of cases that had cited Meadows, we had quite a few cases that had distinguished it right at the top of our search. And if you were someone who was new to the law, potentially a trainee who didn't want to get into trouble by using a bad authority, or someone, if you were new to this area of law and you weren't sure whether this case was good law, you might look at all those red cases and think, actually, I'm not going to touch this one just in case. However, if you come into the Precedent map, you can see that although there are negative treatments, and we can see them here, the most recent negative treatment of Meadows was in 2014, and since then it has had so many positive treatments that it really wouldn't be a worry, especially because the cases, the negative cases were distinguished, not strong negative treatments. But it gives you a really good idea that this case is current law and good law. Whereas again, if you were to open a Precedent map and all these most recent arrows were all red, that would send more alarm bells ringing, and you would think, okay, why has this case had so many negative treatments? Do I want to risk using it myself? So the Precedent map is a really quick way of telling if a case is good law and current law. It does have a secondary use, and that is essentially the sizes of the circles. Now, essentially, the larger the circle, the more case relationships it has in common with our case Meadow. So to give you a better idea, if I was to click on any of these smaller circles, I can see that this case has one case in common with Meadows. Whereas the larger cases will have much more in common. And the best way to display this is to, I can't believe I'm doing it again, click on the neutral cases. Even though it'll be really full, you'll still be able to pick out the larger cases within the Precedent map. So whereas the case that we looked at previously only had one case in common with Meadows, if I click on this case, which is evidently much bigger, Meadows and this Rawson case have about 20 cases in common. So 20 of the cases that have referred to Meadows have also referred to Rawson. So they seem to be cited as authorities in the same cases much more frequently, which stands to reason if you're interested in one, you're going to want to have a look at the other. So using the Precedent map is very easy to pick out which cases are going to be most relevant, because obviously if you're looking at a case in list format, a list of cases, you do not know which cases are going to be relevant and which ones aren't, and usually people just read the top ones or have a look at the cases they're familiar with, whereas this is a much more scientific, I suppose, way of making sure that if you are going to spend some time doing research, you are looking at the best possible cases for the research that you're doing. Now, if you find a case that you're interested in, like Rawson, you can double click on it and it'll form its own precedent map. So this is a case that hasn't actually got many case relationships. So we can see the positive and the negative. If I fill in the neutrals, then it looks a bit more healthy. But it's up to you whether you choose to display the positive, the neutral, or the negative cases. Obviously, with the cases that have been referred to multiple times, it can get a bit crowded. But like I say, all you need to do is pick out the larger circle, or choose to turn the neutral off and focus on the positive and negative cases, which are generally the most important cases for you to look at in any regard. So that is the precedent map. Now I'm going to close that screen and go back to our Meadows case, because I've got one last thing to show you before we sign off for the morning, and that is those pink paragraphs that we saw at the beginning when we started looking at this case. So essentially, where we have come from with creating this feature is called the key paragraphs, is we had all these judgments. So for the UK collection, we have nearly 250,000, so many cases you wouldn't believe, and we wanted to make use of all of this big data. And what we did was we scanned all the cases. We obviously categorized them, which made these unreported cases much easier to locate, and all of the cases actually much easier to find exactly what you're looking for. And we looked at what we've looked at traditionally, so which cases have cited another case, what type of treatment was it positive, was it negative? But what we have also done is looked at when a case is being cited. So a case like Meadows that has been cited so many times subsequently since it went to court itself, why is this a case that people refer to all the time? What section of the Meadows case makes it so important that people refer to it again and again and again? And we found a huge pattern. There was a massive trend with these cases that some of them are hundreds of pages long and boil down to 1, 2, 3 sections of that judgment that meant that that was the reason people were using this case. And that is what we've done. That's what you're seeing right now. These are the main sections of the Meadows case. When people cite Meadows in court, this is why they're citing it. This is what they're citing. So before I even go in and read the judgment, I get a really good idea of why this case is so important and what it is about. Now I can click on any of these and it'll take me to that section of the document so that I can read it in context. And I can also, I'm just going to hide this pane at the moment. I can also click on highlight all quoted passages, and that, if you can see on my scroll bar now, it's created a heat map and highlighted every single section of Meadows that has been cited in another case. Now, this is really useful if I was reading the Meadows judgment. I mean, it's extremely long, so it would allow me to prioritize the more important parts of the text while I was skim reading. I mean, some of you may read all these judgments word for word. I certainly do not, so that is certainly a feature that I appreciate. But it also means that when you're looking, the darker the color that the text is highlighted in, the more frequently that section has been cited. So even within the sections of the text that have been cited, we can even prioritize those. So to give you a good understanding, this paragraph that starts this decision, this first sentence has been cited in another judgment, but it's extremely faint. And if I click on that, I can see it's been cited in one case. So LK and the Minister of Justice cited this exact sentence at paragraph 20. I mean, I'm sure you're imagining the ramifications of this. If I was doing my research and I came across a sentence that I thought, that is crucial, that's key, that's exactly what I'm looking for, I'm going to use that as an authority in my argument, then by clicking on it, you can see if any other judgment has referred to that exact same sentence. And if they have, stands to reason you're going to want to have a look at that case as well. And if you do, you know what case is, what paragraph number this sentence has been cited at, and the court. And if you click on any of the links, it'll take you through to that case, and it'll take you to the exact section of that judgment that makes reference to that sentence. So I've gone from having one really good argument to now having two cases that back me up. Just to give you a comparison, obviously that section was quite faint and it had been cited in one other place. If I click on this section that's extremely dark, you can see all the cases that have referred to this section. So this is obviously one of the key parts of the Meadows case that many other cases have referred to. It just makes research so much easier knowing why these cases are used and what the important parts of the text are. So that is actually my favourite feature of JustisOne, so it's a great one to end on. The only thing I will point out before I let you go and get on with your day is this information button, which is quite new, and essentially if you're using the service and you think, actually, what was that crazy Welsh girl on about? I can't remember what I'm meant to be looking at here. Click on the information tab and it will bring out an explanation of the page you are on, so you can see exactly what you're seeing and what you're looking at on the website, and it will change depending on the page or the section of the database that you are in. So that can be really handy if you're using the service and you have any questions. Obviously, if that doesn't help or if your question is more in depth, please do contact us. So contact helpdesk@justis.com if you have any questions or queries. And also, if you'd like to organise a training session similar to this but customised to your particular subscription that you have at your organisation, please contact training@justis.com and we'll be happy to organise that for you. So before you all go, I'm just going to ask you one last question. There we go. So I'm just going to launch that. You should see that on your screen now. So please do answer that question. Your answers are really appreciated. If you do have any general feedback about this webinar, then you'll be receiving a follow-up email in the next couple of days that will ask you some questions. If you could fill those in, that would be great. And it'll also include some of the links to online resources that you can use to help you with the service as well. So thank you very much for attending today. I really appreciate all of your time, and I hope that this has been helpful and that going forward JustisOne saves you as much time as possible. And like I said, if you do have any questions or queries, we look forward to hearing from you. So thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.